Of course, if you've been following the news, yesterday was a special day for all the wrong reasons, because I had a program on Asempa FM, and for those who don't know, Asempa FM is actually housed in the Joy FM building here at Fanofa Street, Kokomlemle, opposite Multi TV, where we are, if you know where we are. And of course, a political discussion simply degenerated into something else, and pandemonium broke loose right here. It took the security operatives really to calm nerves, and we are told that some of the key characters in the whole discussion had to be ferreted away practically in police vans to prevent a situation of someone being lynched or beaten up or whatever. And of course, this is a political year. This is a major political year. You have an election at the end of the year, and when these things happen, it raises a lot of questions to us. And so we are discussing it tonight and asking ourselves how we can get political parties to be decorous in all the heated discussions they are of course going to be engaged in. But how do we ensure that they do it properly? There's a political parties code of conduct for 2012. It will form the warp and woof of our discussion tonight. It's not the first time the Institute of Economic Affairs is putting one together. Of course, I remember some years ago when we were there, the very first one was signed by all the political parties, and normally they append their signatures. This one has all the signatures in here from all the political parties. It's NDC, MPP, PNC, CPP, DFP, GCPP, GLE, URPs, and then the NCC and the IEA added to the number to complete it. So we have a few, if you like, not to call them rules, but a few points that will make us all play according to the rules and be decorous. And all the political parties have actually said, yes, we are ready to play by the rules. The question is that, are they playing by these rules? How do we ensure that they do so? And on page 19 of this book, are the words, political parties and political leaders demonstrate commitment towards the enforcement of the provisions of the code by educating their members and supporters of the provisions, as well as disown those who breach any of the provisions. So we are asking that, what do we expect to happen based on what occurred yesterday? How do we ensure that really it does not continue? And of course, we always have the history of other African countries in mind, where we are always told, people say, oh, it has become hackneyed. Yes, you keep saying it happened in a country, a radio station, but it's a real thing. It actually did happen. Let's see how we can get this thing to go away. You can send your views to us to 1760 by text across all mobile networks. A text message will cost you 30 pesos to send. If you're on Facebook, it's facebook.com/Multi TV World. In the studio with us tonight, on my immediate left, Ernest Chum is a programs officer at the Institute of Economic Affairs, IEA. Thank you for coming, Ernest. Next to Ernest is Nana Oye Letha, Executive Director, Human Rights Advocacy Center. It's good to have you again on the show, Nana Oye. And of course, we welcome in for the first time Sheikh Aremeyao. He is a member, board member actually, of CODEO. It's the Coalition of Domestic Election Observers. Let's get straight to action. I'll begin with you, Nanoye. Ladies first, they say. All right, let's play an insert actually. So to lay a good foundation, a background for our discussion, there's a video insert of what occurred yesterday, which I said in my introduction here at the premises of Asempa FM. Watch this, we'll come back to the studio to take it out from there.
the show was on, the usual, sometimes, heckles and stuff that come up. And we were in the studio between the hosts and one panelist from the MPP side. And the producer of the show had to step in, to get the panelists out so the program could continue. There was an encounter between hosts and the panelists.
What brought the encounter?
It was about question and answers, specifics of which, because I came in a bit late, but I mean the point was that the host kept asking the panelists to say certain things. And I think the NDC panelists digressed from the topic under discussion, and the MPP panelist was compelled to respond in the same manner. For me, the most important question was and is, what are the criteria that we must consider in choosing leaders for this country? And I sincerely believe courage is one of them. I believe sincerity and honesty is one of them. I believe also that vision and believe in vision and living according to what we also say from the major bulk of what should be said. As to some of the things that were said by some people from the NDC side, Dr. Tony Edu, who called in and were talking about certain things and casting aspersions here and there, for me were irrelevant and side issues that we could discuss without necessarily throwing punches.
So bottom line is you are discussing leadership.
I believe sincerely that moving forward as a country, we need to discuss the kind of people who present themselves as leaders of this country, whether they are courageous, whether they have the proven track record that in their private personal lives they've held leadership positions before, and whether or not they will be able to take us to the promised land. 54 years of independence, and yet we are struggling with the basic means to life: food, water, health, employment, education. It's a shame.
Well, thank you very much for staying with us. I'm sure you have views on this matter already. 1760 is a text line across all mobile networks. If you're on Facebook, it's facebook.com/multi-TV world. Nanoye, what do you make of the disturbances at Asempa FM yesterday? And of course, Asempa FM is housed in the Joy FM building, just so you know. But it in the studios of Asempa FM is where the discussion happened. I believe it's a local language show. What do you make of this?
Well, if you have been monitoring the press and monitoring what is happening on our airwaves, you will not really be surprised that this is happening. And if we don't stop or intervene, it's going to get worse. And it's basically because the stakes are high. Our political system is structured in a way that the winner takes all. And so people are ready to do whatever it takes to win elections for obvious purposes. And so people may instigate others and may do exactly what we saw on just before we started this discussion. So I'm not really surprised, because you tune in to the radio, especially the radio, and you listen to discussions, you go onto websites or chat rooms where there's political discourse. And this is what you see, one insult after the other. And the most cynical thing is that, you insult and then the next day you're talking about we need to be tolerant and no insults. It's so ridiculous.
So do you think we should be blaming somebody for this? Is it part of the solution? Because a lot of the time the regular question is, who do we blame for the occurrence?
Well,
is blame the way out?
I don't think blame is the way out. I think it is time we took action, drastic action. Who to take the action, we need to decide, but it's time we named and shamed. We should not allow politicians and the media to take us for a ride. I mean, we have a certain society and we have an image as a state, as a country, and we need to ask ourselves that, is this what we want to see in this country, the star of Africa? So these are questions we ought to ask ourselves.
Sheikh, let me come to you and ask you, we've had 5 general elections since '92 under the 4th Republican Constitution. This is the 6th one we are going to be having. Are the stakes any higher now than they have always been? And do you think that this politics of insults we've been talking about has taken a special shape all of a sudden?
Thank you very much. I think the stakes are high for several reasons. Though this should not be the reason why sometimes we should lose our sense of decency in public political discourse. For example, like we know as a tradition in African politics, NDC is just one term. And from all indications, political parties would not want to serve just one term in office, would want to continue, at least come to the second term. So it's a sign of weakness in the mind of most political parties. That it's a sign of weakness it's a sign of weakness, for political parties to just spend just one term and leave office. Okay. Yeah. Now, the other...
Particularly because it has not happened in the Fourth Republic so far.
Exactly, yeah. So I'm using NDC as an example, for example. It's just having gone to opposition and come back to power, just one term. NDC is not prepared to go just one term. They must go 2 terms, at least. Now, MPP, I'm using these 2 parties because they are the bigger parties and they foment the trouble. Okay. Yeah. Now, MPP also feels that probably through some other mistakes they made, that they could have made it. They could not. So now they see the chances that they will be able to do so. And so there is that kind of a penchant, a strong desire to really want to win. So I think, and then the third issue is that there's a certain closeness in terms of the dominance of the 2 parties. So competitions usually become heated when the competitors are so close in terms of their strength and what they are able to achieve. And you can see it just coming from the last elections. The margin is not any big thing to think about. So both parties think that, look, working hard will be able to make it. The other issue is, the tradition of our political, activity. Where you have to prove strong. You must prove a little bit ferocious, fiery, in order to send a certain message to your opponent that you will be able to. A clear example is, just for an example, I'm using it. What became a balance in our political discourse this day. All die be die. It's one of the signals that. If you take in NDC before Professor Mills came into power, for example, looking at the chances, given that things went on well, NDC could make some progress. But given that this process is manipulated, they could lose that chance. So he also sent a message that President Kufuor should make sure that he does things the right way so that Kenya does not come, because at the time we're just not far away from what had happened in Kenya. Right. Now, that message sent a signal. It's a strong signal that if the right thing is not done, what happened in Kenya is going to result in our country. All that, this is to show a certain body language that I'm able to do what's in my power to be able to really wrestle power. But the other issue for me that brings about the insult, I think that in our political discourse, people who sound so ferocious are recognized and respected in the parties, and to some extent rewarded. So for you to catch the eye of the bigwigs in your political party, you must sound as somebody who is able to use every means to defend or to promote the cause of your party. In that regard, we lose our sense of ethics and decency. Ethics or morality or whatever you think about is not the issue here. Do it in any way that you think it's possible for you to. And as people, what is it that makes us human? Take the human being and remove his morality and ethics, and he's just equal to any other beast.
Very interesting. Ernest, just permit me to go back to Nanoye, because I'll come to you particularly about the code and where it steps in, and I think that will really be your forte on this one as we move forward. But Nanoye, let me come back to you and ask you. I think that Sheikh makes some very important points. I mean, basically, the parties love the hatchet men, so to speak. If you're a destroyer, you know you'll be deputy minister come what may when we come to power, if we come to power, and all those things. So it seems to be. But again, we seem to also have a very antagonistic political history. I mean, right from 1949 when we formed our second political party, the antagonism between the Nkrumah side and the JB Dankwa side, etc., played out all the way till the military coups always come in to justify the reason why we are divided. If you are champions, the union government, because these people are dividing us up and all of those things. So it seems that we've had that tradition for quite a long time, except it seems to have hit a certain level all of a sudden. Do you think that we are getting something wrong, and are we able to correct it before these elections?
As you have noted, it's been part of our political history. And you talked about the divisions, especially what occurred in the Ashanti region during Kwame Nkrumah, after Kwame Nkrumah had won, and we heard of the Matemehu and what happened, the NLM and the killings and all that occurred. I am not able to make a clear connection between there and now, but it's obvious that we have some strands still with that antagonism is still there, and people it's debatable the level or the extent to which ethnicity plays into our political discourse. But I think the issue is that people are acting with impunity because, like Sheikh said, they can stand on the public platform and insult, and really insult, and nothing happens to them. And so they get bolder. So we need to ask ourselves that, how do we address, nothing happens to them. And I'm sure for some who stood and insulted, they will do that and they'll do more the very next day. So there's something missing. And how do we, is it the National Media Commission? Is it the Ghana Journalists Association? Is it the court or what?
Because the political parties themselves. And
the political party, because the thing is that you're going to spend forever in court. Libel, slander, you're going to spend forever in court. So, and the case could drag on. So there's really nothing, there are no sanctions that we have in place, more or less, practically. So what happens? And you start the political discussions on radio, on television. It seems like that's how you cultivate and nurture the those who become political leaders, and those who become the faces of the political parties. And it doesn't seem like the political parties are doing much. Let's look at what happened in South Africa with the youth leader, is it Malema? Look at what happened. The ANC have suspended him. He went on appeal, and he's still been suspended. And now he's thinking of how he can reintegrate. Who has been sanctioned? Let's look at NDC, MPP, PNC, CPP. And let's even mention one political figure that has been sanctioned for insulting and going against the code.
Interesting. And it's a good point to bring you in, Ernest, because really, I'm looking at this joint communique issue at the end of a 3-day workshop to review the Political Parties Code of Conduct 2008. And it's in the Political Parties Code of Conduct 2012. And of course, the date is Friday the 19th to Sunday the 21st of August 2011, that recently, in Ebri. And I'm seeing that this is part of the preamble, and that will be 8, if we can call it clause 8. Participants, however, agreed to the following, 8b, that political parties and political leaders demonstrate commitment towards the enforcement and implementation of the provisions of the code by educating their members and supporters on the provisions, as well as disown those who breach any of these provisions. Do you think this will happen? Do you see any political party in Ghana disowning its member? Because the perfect example I know you gave from South Africa, from the ANC, is what the parties themselves are saying that they would do. Do you see this happening?
I think to a large extent, as it stands now, IEA is in the preparation of establishing the national and the regional enforcement bodies to ensure that parties complies with the provisions of the political parties code of conduct. And as you indicated, whether the parties will commit to especially this specific provision of disowning their members. And I don't think, or I've never seen happening in our country for some time now. It's rather unfortunate that at this time we are seeing what we saw on TV just now, because we are at a critical state. We are in an election year, and it's sad that parties have signed onto this code, and we see members of the parties going contrary to the provisions of the code. It's very unfortunate, but we believe that it's an early stage, and there's more that can be done to ensure that parties comply by the provisions of the code. And as I indicated, the IEA is in the process of establishing the enforcement body, and the mandate of the enforcement body is to ensure the operations of the political parties code of conduct. They ensure that parties comply with the provisions of the code, and it will be established at the national level and at the regional levels.
Where would that body derive its power from?
I think the parties themselves have agreed that the enforcement bodies should be able to name and shame those who breach the provisions of the code. And though there are also other criminal laws already in our statutory laws, and we're hoping that our law enforcement bodies should be able to also ensure that these laws are enforced. It's rather unfortunate that most of the time during the elections period, we are not able to classify certain violence as electoral violence, and we are left them just like that. But we hope that it's time our law enforcement bodies sit up. We shouldn't differentiate between what is electoral violence. Violence is violence. If you take a gun and you shoot someone today, it's violence, and during the elections time, it's the same thing. So I think going forward as a country, we should be able to make sure that our laws are really enforced, especially the mandate of the law enforcement body. And we are hoping that the parties themselves will be, especially the leadership who have signed on to this, will be able to call to order some of the party activists, especially those who they send on radio and TV talk shows.
It sounds to me as though it's more of a moral thing that you expect them to live by. Because assuming this body you are going to set up, IEA, someone says, okay, I want to appear before you. Really, what do you have against them, as you mentioned the other bodies? And I also see that you're here, you talk about the NMC, GJA, private newspaper, Ghana Independent Broadcasters Association should ensure the enforcement, and all that. And you're calling on other bodies. But we have to take a quick commercial break at this stage. 1760 is a text line. Facebook.com/multi-TV PM Express is the address on Facebook. When we come back, we'll look at enforcement of these things that the political parties themselves say that they will abide by. Ernest, let me go to Sheikh from where you left off. I'll come back to you. Sheikh, enforcement may always be quite difficult, especially when, well, let me not lay too much of a background. Let me just try and find out from you, how do we enforce this? Because people go and use language that is not acceptable to us, and yet you realize that members of their party will rally to their support. Irrespective of which party they belong to, their members will definitely come and shield them and all. And like you said, they are applauded for really striking the other person down, whether by words or by whatever form. How do we ensure? Because this is beautiful. And I think I was a program officer at IEA when the first one was done, early 2000 and something, 2001, 2002, thereabout, and all that. And I remember we actually framed it and put it up there with all the nice signatures, and Peter Alajeti and co, who are like, may he rest in peace, or national chairman and all that. But really, have we made a lot of progress since then? That's a good effort by the IEA. But how do we make sure that it happens? How do we enforce it?
To start with, this thing, all the political parties said they have just voluntarily accepted this.
Absolutely.
In other words, what the content of this document, for example, is not binding on them. In other words, they have just decided to accept it, or to put it together for themselves. If they decide that they would not want to apply it, nobody is there to force them into doing so. And I find that is one of the inherent contradictions of democracy. I mean, it's a concept, it's a philosophy, I mean, that allows opportunity for people to do things on the basis of their liberties and freedoms. And yet these freedoms are not shrouded, strongly with the responsibilities that go with it. In other words, even as you express and exercise your freedom, the sense of responsibility must tell you that you cannot have absolute freedom. So in our democratic understanding of issues. I think that this thing is not clear in our minds. So it accounts for this. Now, given that that's the way it is, and then that we cannot force anybody, I think we need to find platforms and certain procedures and processes that we can put in place, institutional arrangements. For example, I would want to see that the NCCE, for example, is strengthened so much so that just by civic education alone, I think that education is the answer. If citizens of this country are well educated and they know what is the best for this country, I believe that they will begin to check their behavior. Secondly, if citizens who support political parties can see that this political party is not in to do anything good for me, everything that it does is in the negative, that it just pushes our country into the dangerous, side of the periphery, then they should be able to take a decision, an informed decision, and make a choice among which political party is the best that works in the interest of the country. Unfortunately, the supporters, majority of the supporters are either half educated or they are even not educated. They don't understand the issues, very well. They follow fanfare. They are just carried away. So you need a political party that's so strong and has studied the psychology of the people and knows what it takes to be able to carry them along. And then it takes them. So I think that strong education, creating strong awareness in the minds of the citizens. It may not be the best thing to do. I'm running away from this because I think that the law will not be able to force these political parties. But our conscience and understanding, I don't know whether it makes sense, but I think that if religious groups, I have a strong belief that close to 95% of the population of this country belong to one religion or the other. And if religion does influence people's life, and they have a good reason why every Friday we have quite a good number of Muslims going to the mosque. Every Sunday, between the hours of 9 o'clock and 12 o'clock, the whole town is silent because almost every Christian's in the church. For example. And if the message that peace for our country is the best for us, I think that this should help people to be able to make. When you were talking, I was taking down my point. I don't know. Shaming and naming and shaming. To what extent does it influence? Is it somebody who does not have a sense of ethics, does not also have, who is bereft of sense of ethics, does not know what is called shame? Provided he can achieve what he wants to. So for him, the end justifies the means. It doesn't work. So let's find a way by which we can educate the populace in such a way that they can reject such parties that appear to be so aggressive and irresponsible in the way that they do their things.
And as I'm looking at this code, and I realize that there's a lot of what you might characterize as moral suasion. Page 8, political parties shall desist from the use of inflammatory language, heightening of ethnic and other tensions, personal attacks and acts of violence, and it goes on. They shall desist from the use of this. Okay, great. Page 9, they shall ensure fairness in their activities, moderating such activities in a manner that minimizes tension and avoids misrepresentation. Okay. Then you go to page 12, you see that it says where there is a breach. Now this is enforcement, which is a critical part for me. Where you talk about the body may publish declarations or findings and all of that. And that an inter-party monitoring committee shall also be established to facilitate the enforcement of this code. But what are you calling enforcement? If you make a declaration and you publish it, how much of an enforcement is that? If someone is insulting people or fighting with them, beating them up, running into them, driving through them. We've had issues of people shooting in crowds during political rallies, etc., and all of that. What if you publish something about them by way of a finding? How much of an enforcement is that which they say they will do if you just publish?
I think, as Sheikh just mentioned, it's something that parties have voluntarily adopted and have pledged to abide by it. So I think for now, what is most important is to be able to publicize the content of the code of conduct. And if we are able to make citizens well informed about what the parties themselves has pledged themselves to do, and at the end of the day, the electors are able to say, no, they pledge that they will ensure fairness in elections, they will ensure peace and stability, but yes, so carrying out their political activities we see they doing different thing altogether. The electors themselves could be able to say, no, if these people pledge to do this, and even with this, they're not able to do it, if we leave the entire country in their hands, are they going to be able to manage the affairs of the country? So to a large extent, as I indicated, if the committee or the enforcement body is able to publish the findings of the breaches of the code of conduct and make it public to the electorate for them to be aware that this is what the party A said they would do, but now they are doing this. To a large extent, it could even have influenced their voting pattern. They might even vote against that particular party. So, as you indicated, the enforcement is good, especially when we set up the body to ensure the enforcement of the body is very, very critical. But the question is, it's up to the parties to decide whether they are going to abide by it or not, or they just sign it for signing's sake. I'm not sure. They just append their signatures for just the beauty of it. But as far as they've promised to abide by it, if you're able to monitor the breaches of it and make it public to the electorate to be able to know whether the parties are complying by the code or they are going contrary to what they've said, it can also influence the voting pattern. And we are hoping that this body will be established by the end of March this year, for them to start their operations. Moving forward, I think that it's high time, especially with the media, to be able to publicize some of these documents. I think the code, as Sheikh mentioned, the NCC too has a mandate to be able to educate the citizens about what the parties have signed on to. I think all this, the provisions of this code are already existing in our criminal codes. And I think one of the issues that came up during the review of the code is whether it should have a legal backing or it should be taken to Parliament to have a legal backing. But what we realized was that the provisions are already in our criminal codes, the provisions are already in our electoral laws. So it's up to we Ghanaians to ensure that we hold parties accountable to what they've signed on to, and especially our law enforcement agencies. We shouldn't hide behind politics and say, no, we are in election year, this is political activities, let's leave them. Especially when we look at what happened in 2008. We can't sit down and watch things go as it started now. I think we should hold our parties accountable to the code that they've signed on to. And I think moving forward, we'll be able to see peace as coming in elections.
When we return from this break, I'll be asking Anoye about whether this provision really is sitting in the right place, referring to the joint communique where the political parties are saying, Jay, that media houses should not allow their facilities to be used to undermine or subvert any of the provisions of the political party's code of conduct. That may be a good call. The question is it in the right place? Is it for the political parties under their code to say that media houses should not do so? And how critical will you say the media are to really making sure that we help simmer down the tension? Staff from Medina Estate says, I solidly agree with Sheikh that we seriously need to educate the masses on some of these matters. I think they are being used by the politicians. All right, thank you, Esther. Momoni Rashid from Yendi. I think the hosts, the panelists all have a role to play in putting a stop to this bad behavior in our politics. We hear the president and his vice calling on Ghanaians to stop the politics of insults, but I don't think they are serious with that call. They have to lead by example. All right, Momoni, have you heard them insulting, or you basically mean that they should call people to order people under them? Ignatius Kofi Amaglo says, isn't it scary and frightening where irresponsible politicking is taking place in this lively and lovely nation of ours? All these are born out of some people's desperation and hunger for power. The media have a lot to do to guarantee free, fair, peaceful, and violence-free elections in December. Thank you for your view. Stephen Siberi says, the media have a role to play in making this election peaceful. The hosts of political talk shows should mind the questions they ask their guests and stop callers who phone in to insult. All right, good points there. Abdullah Mohammed Awal says that the moderators of such programs are to be blamed for most of the unfortunate incidents. As soon as a panelist begins to make a derogatory remark, the host must expel that individual from the program. And I think Matilda of Joy FM News File needs to be commended for taking such actions. Achanga Asobik Thomas from Bongo says, having failed to deliver on their 2008 campaign promises, the NDC think that their only chance is through character assassination of Akufo-Addo to get our votes again in 2012. This time, we are watching them with eagle eyes. They surely will be kicked out come December. White Edmond Bradley, I listened to the program yesterday afternoon and I knew from the way the line of arguments were going that it wasn't going to end well. I believe Bobby Ansah and the host did not also handle things well, which contributed to what happened. Okay, all right. Innocent. Okay, all right. So those will be the quick messages I'll be taking now. I'm sure we'll be taking some more. I just asked about the media and the role of the media. It's in this code of conduct. I don't know if that has any effect on the media, so to speak. I don't know if it's in the right place. And well, that's what you said, that the media doesn't have a role. It's a two-pronged question I'm asking you. In the first place, is this sitting in the right place? That media houses not allowed their facilities to be used to undermine or subvert any of the provisions of the political party's code of conduct. How is that useful in a political party's code of conduct?
Well, I see this code of conduct as guiding principles.
Okay.
They're guiding
for
principles.
non-political parties as well?
For political parties and non-political parties.
All right. So that
because the verbal assaults and the insults occur within through a certain medium.
Right.
So it doesn't bind the media houses, but at least mention has been made, and they can refer to it.
Okay.
Or those who would hold the political parties accountable have a reference point in this code of conduct. Right. You have raised, or I also raised concerns about how effective this code of conduct is and to what extent it can be enforced. I'll also raise one big question I keep asking myself and reflecting on is, how do we ensure that we reduce the insults? And like Sheikh said, we the people would have to reject politicians who insult. Right. But we are glorifying the politicians who insult. They are more popular. Right. And why we need to look at the media is that at least that is the medium of communication. And they come onto your platforms. You invite them to speak. And like some of those who contributed to this program said, the moderators and the hosts and the hostesses sometimes actually provoke. They provoke the insults by the line of questioning. And it seems like we want more people, the more there's insults and the more there's abusive use of language and the more controversial a program is, the more people will listen. And then we get adverts and whatever. So there's also the commercial and money bit, the financial bit of it. Right. Because you listen to certain programs and it's obvious that the moderator is provoking the panelists to go along a certain line. So the moderators and the media houses are even not adhering to their own codes and their ethical values of what is responsible broadcasting. And some concerns have also been raised. Some people, I can't verify, that some media persons are in the pay pocket of politicians. Concerns have been raised about that. Sure. So then certain media persons may project certain political parties. So it's all financial. Right. Another problem is also the religious groups. We hear a lot of religious leaders talking about no insults and all that. But what have they, in concrete terms, what have they done? Right. Because some of the churches and some of the mosques have been politicized. Because if we have politicians, the politicians are using the churches and the mosques and some of these religious platforms as political platforms. How can a politician drive into a church service, in the middle of a church service, is allowed to come, stays for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and then gives an address and drives off to another church? So the churches are also being used. And why would you allow a politician a platform in your church when you know that politician the previous day has been insulting on radio or TV? So the churches and the mosques should also show commitment to this. You can't have your cake and eat it, criticize and say no insults, and then do nothing about it. Right. We are tired of hearing religious people preaching high from their pulpits and doing nothing. We want them to do something. So if you're saying 90% or what of us are religious, what about the pastors
what should they do?
And the imams?
No, what should the pastors and
they
imams do?
should name, tell us that so and so said this, and we must reject such a politician. They should name and shame.
But I'm sure a lot of them will ask you why, for example, they should mention either Professor Mills or Nana Akufo-Addo, whichever one.
Why not?
And say I have a problem with one of them.
Why not?
And so congregation, don't vote for this or
why
that person.
not?
That would be a huge problem for the church.
Well, that is what we want them to do. If they are committed to ensuring that we have a violence-free elections, and if they are committed to their biblical principles that they pontificate about, then they should be committed to naming and shaming. Let's mention the names of the politicians.
Wouldn't they be foisting their own political views on their congregation?
It's not a matter of foisting your own political views. It's a matter of stating the facts. Okay. That Ni Ade of XYZ political party
is the best candidate for the election.
So let's name and shame. But I think, like Sheikh said, we as people must reject politicians and other persons who insult. That is the only way.
Interesting. Ernest, as we've been talking about this and all of that, let me ask you a question perhaps a bit away from this. You may still use it though, and ask you, how do you think that the media can contribute to really keeping everybody in check?
I think somewhere last year, that year organized a workshop for the senior media personnel and the political talk shows of the various radio and TV stations. Okay. And I think in the communique that was issued, one of the critical requirement that the NMCs will ensure that the delayed broadcasting equipment is being purchased by the media houses, especially the electronic media houses, the radios and the TVs, to be able to edit some of these comments, especially the insults. The newspapers, they're able to edit them. You don't see the newspapers putting the insult in the news reports. But on radio, if it's a person is on a studio discussion and he mention an insult, it comes directly to the listener. So I believe that it's high time the NMC will be able to check the media houses, especially the issue of delayed broadcasting. If we are indeed serious about freedom of speech, and it's now the freedom of speech is actually in a way also affecting our democracy. Like, we are more focused on the freedom than the responsibility that comes with the freedom. People feel that now it's freedom of speech, so we can say anything, anywhere, anyhow. But that shouldn't be how it should go. There are certain things you can't say it just like that and go your way scot-free, especially at critical moment in an election year. There are certain comments that shouldn't be coming out from our political leaders and political activists. And moving forward, as NMC has a responsibility to check the practice of the media houses, and because of the what do you call it, the large number of media houses, even it's affecting the quality of journalists that we produce. And as I think one of the things people are calling for, even the hosts of political talk shows, whether themselves they are aligned to certain particular political line, and it also affects the way they do their work. So moving forward, I think it's high time the NMC ensure that radio stations and TV stations are able to purchase the delayed broadcasting equipment to be able to scrutinize some of these comments that come from panelists. I think that's the best way to ensure some of this insult. Okay. It's sad, especially the most difficult aspect is the insult is coming from, most of the time, the youth of our country.
Okay. Let's take a quick commercial break. It's a snappy one. Stay with us. We'll be right back. We have just a few minutes to go. Let's get Sheikh's view on the media's contribution.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the media, impacts so much on the psyche of the community. Just take an example of an issue like the Valentine. The first time it was hyped so much in this country by the media. This country never knew much about Valentine until the time when, I think about 2 or 3 years ago, when during the time the whole media landscape, they took it up, and you saw how the whole of the youth, accepted it, until we also saw the dangers on it and came back, and now we're talking about the HIV/AIDS and so on and so forth. So it tells you that the media is one of the powerful means by which you can give a certain orientation to people. But my worry and concern is that, do the media practitioners understand that they hold this power? And as they do so, do they, again, guide themselves by certain ethics? See, ethics underpin every activity that makes us do things in a very decent way. Yeah. That's why in every profession there are what we call, code of ethics. Every profession in this world. In other words, you cannot just go just like that and do it. So if media is such a powerful tool in our social and political development, then they must also look at the ethical side of their work. I think the absence of that is what is creating so much problem for us. Secondly, we are in danger now of an emerging phenomenon in our political activity, where rich politicians, for example, are able to establish media stations, for example, a television station, an FM station that has been established by a politician, and it broadcasts along certain line to pursue the aspiration and agenda of a political party. And it's been given the license and he's operating. Who stops? And he knows who and who comes. But we must reach a stage where those of us who are invited on certain media stations, I have a principle that if I indict a particular radio or television station, I don't go there when I'm invited. Sometimes I'm able to say it bluntly, that no, this station, I don't go there. Because I think it does affect my dignity for me to go to such a station. But sometimes people also want to be heard. So the moment you are called on any kind of station, you just want to go there and talk. People must make a choice from these and know where to go and where not to go. But the media, it's really a difficult thing.
We have just a minute or so to go, but now you have a quick.
I think two points I'd like to make. I do not think the media can self-regulate, because that is what we have now. Our media is self-regulating, and it is failing. It is not working. Lawyers, we have our professional, the General Legal Council. The nurses and midwives have the Nurses and Midwives Council. The doctors have their council that regulates the profession. We came from a certain political history where we were, we had the silence and everything. We have moved, and now we have the press freedom is guaranteed, and there's, there are no restrictions to the extent that we are number 1 or 2 in the Africa region. I believe it's time that we set up a council to regulate the media, to regulate standards. And it should be passed into an act. There should be an act of parliament.
I don't think that the NMC is
no, that will strengthen the NMC. And we should scale up media monitoring, especially towards the elections. I think that will help. So these are my 2 points, that we should move beyond the self-regulation. It has failed.
Okay. What would your final remarks? Are you able to say something in 30 seconds or less?
I think moving forward, as Sheikh and Nanawi has mentioned, the media is a very powerful tool, and we can cite examples from other African countries whereby the work of the media has led to years of protracted violence in many parts of African countries. So, I think the media has a responsibility in ensuring that 2012 election become peaceful, and they have a responsibility to ensure that the make the parties accountable to the code that they've signed on to, and they have a responsibility to educate the populace on the provisions of the party's code of conduct.
Thank you. Eugene from Dansoman says Ghana needs a very neutral group of people who are not aligned to a particular political party. The agenda will be to support what is good and hate against what is bad, irrespective of the party in power. In this case, they can campaign against any party whose supporters constantly misbehave. Okay, that's Eugene with his view on that one. Hiatepe Christian Young says, politics in Ghana has now become a mathematical insult since new formulae are used every day to solve the same problem. Our political fathers propel politically infected words from their money-filled mouth anyhow. Please tell them to stop insulting their own destiny. Interesting way to put it. Elolo Yekple says, I totally blame the media houses for this. Instead of inviting political analysts to discuss issues, they always invite the hardcore political activists into their studios. In a system where political power is this lucrative, political apparatchiks will fight tooth and nail to get rewarded, even if it means destroying others. All right, interesting view that you sent to us. I think we have a final one here. Yakubu from Boga says, Nana, you've won my support on all that call to set up a council for the media landscape in Ghana. All right, that's all the way from Bolga.